Welcome to our special segments on election 2025, where we talk about the platforms. Today, Ian Burns and Ian on the phone with me, all the way from our Ottawa office. We're going to talk housing. Housing, one of the biggest things in this election. Housing, and housing in a crisis here in Canada. Housing prices have soared in Canada.
Indeed, yeah. And even with all of this, all the stock market plunges and all the fear with the tariffs, they're pretty much holding on to their value, aren't they?
Yeah, pretty much. And then, like interest rates are starting to come down. So, likely um, that's not going to really drop the housing prices. And actually, a lot of the homeowners don't want that to drop because it's tough to pay a mortgage when you're underwater. And I understand. I watched something. A lot of the condos that are closing in Toronto right now, people are walking away. They say 20 to 30% of people are walking away on their deposits on condo development in Toronto right now because the prices have gone down a little bit.
Indeed, and that sort of explains perhaps a cynic such as me would argue. It explains why so many Canadians are rather sanguine about gigantic mass migration, because all that does is increase demand on housing, which is often quite good news for a lot of people. But the reality is, that's me being cynical. What is not cynical, what's true, is that Canadians seem to have an obsession with housing as a kind of store of value, something that we share in common with the Chinese, actually, our brothers across the water there. And it's, instead of stocks, instead of things like, gold or Bitcoin or whatever, a lot of people in Canada don't really look past houses. Housing
Okay.
is their pension, it's everything. That is their one asset in the world. And that kind of explains why there's a massive reluctance to see the price decline.
The majority of Canadian wealth is you're bang on, it's in housing. The majority of Canadian wealth is in housing. Like personal wealth is in their homes. And the problem is in the last decade, since Justin Trudeau has been in power, housing has more than doubled, and that's the highest in the G7. Another claim to fame for the G7 in Canada. Now,
Yeah.
39% of our median household income went towards housing in the past. Now, 60% goes to housing. 60% of household income goes to housing. That means you still got to buy food, gas, pay your car payment, all those things. And, like maybe go out once in a while, and maybe a lot of people think even going to a hockey game is out of their realm now because of so much of their dollar goes towards um, housing.
Yep, it's completely sickening, isn't it? And obviously because that can include rental as well as sort of mortgage payments. So I mean, it's a whole extra dimension of misery when you're spending 60% of your income to rent, because then you're just giving that money to somebody else so they can pay off their mortgage. So that kind of explains as well this eager desire among people that don't have homes to get one ASAP. But I mean, it's an important piece of context here is about two-thirds, almost exactly two-thirds, 66% of Canadians are considered to be homeowners. So you can kind of see as well, considering what we just talked about, the price of houses and how people's wealth is like buried in their homes. You can kind of see why politicians have let this one go for so long, because it's the majority of the electorate, and it's the thing that they're most concerned about. Not only is it the place that they live, but it's also their sort of trust fund. It's the money under their mattress.
So it's really been the benefit of the older generation, for sure, the people have had houses, but it's taken away the dream of a home from many young people, and that's the part that got a lot of people upset. And even the liberals admit now that immigration, like the record high immigration levels, contributed to this housing crisis. And even our premier Eby here says it that like the immigration is just way too much. Quebec even said they don't want any more. So.
Yeah, well, just I think it was today, or last night, a minister in the Quebec provincial government said Quebec can't. open its arms to the world's misery or something like that, that in reference to the the Haitian migrants that are coming over from the US. So yeah, I mean, Quebec's as usual with Quebec, they're sort of way
They
out there. But I
they
mean,
can get away
EB,
with
you're
that.
right.
They can get away with that comment. Somebody else out west could never get away with that comment, right?
Absolutely. And it's ironic you mentioned West, is it like, if we're just going to talk about Alberta specifically, because Danielle Smith, and Alberta, that they're actually very, very pro-immigration, aren't they? They're really, really in favor of it.
Hmm.
The one thing that they have said though is that maybe it was a little bit too rapid and they couldn't absorb them into the jobs market and they've had higher unemployment. But yeah, we're getting distracted now. We're doing the weave. We're doing the Trump
Yeah.
weave here.
So what are the solutions? And that this is where election time comes in, and then the parties pitch their policies to kind of win the voter over. What are they offering? And that's what we're going to talk about right here. Between the difference between what the liberals are offering and what the conservatives are offering to solve this crisis. And I'll start off by saying that one of the things the liberals did do good, and especially in this colonial market, is they took the GST off of rental made properties, and that really because in Kelowna rental properties were almost there was almost none to be had. That did really stoke a lot of rental purpose buildings, and now we have too much. We're actually probably looking at a 7% vacancy rate. And so that was one of the successful things. And I did interview Sean Fraser, the housing minister at the time, and said, "Why don't you take the GST off of homes, because that works so well in the purpose-built rentals? Why not do that for single-family homes?" And he said that at that time they weren't thinking about doing it, and they didn't have the money to do it. But lo and behold, Pierre Poilievre put that policy out to take the GST off of homes under $1 million. And then the Liberals, actually, they came out with that same policy. So we'll just go through these policies. So the Liberals have come out and said they will take the GST off homes under $1 million for first-time homebuyers.
1.3 million now. He upped it, didn't he?
No, I'm talking about the Liberals.
Oh, sorry, the Liberals, right? I thought
No,
you
no,
were on
no, the
Comrade
Liberals.
Polyev.
No, Liberals. The Liberals they've taken our suggestion and Pierre's suggestion and taken the GST off of first-time home buyers. First thing, gotta remember that, first-time home buyers under $1 million. So a lot of people
Yeah.
don't typically buy, and this is for new homes though, right? This isn't for your home purchase. This is for new homes, right? This isn't for like resale homes, right? Because there is no GST on resale homes, right? So there's GST.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is particularly aimed at the Toronto area, isn't it? And then new builds,
Yeah,
rather than like older communities where there aren't many new homes.
yeah, and then a lot of people though that are buying first-time home buyers typically don't buy new homes. They typically buy something out of the used market. One, it's dangerous, and I've had some friends. It's dangerous to buy a new home for first-time buyers, especially if it's 2 years out, because you got to put the deposit in, and interest rates could change. And I've had a few friends that actually have qualified at the current rate, and then the rates went up, and they didn't qualify, and then they're at risk of losing their deposit.
And you're also at risk of getting a shoddily built home. I mean, I hear a lot of nightmare
Yeah.
stories about new homes not being built to a very high standard
So
compared to
the
the
other,
older ones.
let's just compare apples to apples here first. So Pierre Poilievre then upped his, and he said he'll axe the GST. He likes to use the word axe the GST on all new homes. All new homes. This is not first-time home buyers. All new homes under $1.3 million. That's a savings of about $65,000. That's significant.
Yeah.
So that doesn't matter if that's your first home, second home, third home. That is all new homes under that. So that really will encourage building homes. That will really stoke some people building homes, because $65,000, you can put a lot of value into a home.
Yeah, I mean, that's a consequential sum of money, isn't it? I mean, it's almost consequential to the extent that you're really going to have to wonder how it's going to be paid for, what's going to be dropped from the government's expenditure there, because it's a lot of money to lose that. But it is quite consequential. I mean, he has been, questions have been raised about whether it will really be passed on, because it tends to be the case that there aren't very many developers in any given market. It could be very easy for them to not decrease their prices, but theoretically, that's what should happen.
But if you think about that, though, so the liberal plan is first-time home buyers, a smaller market for sure, and then all buyers, like a way wider market, like when you're switching homes. Like a lot of people, maybe they bought their first home and they bought a small. Like a lot of people start in like small apartments and that because that's their first home purchase. They take that money and they buy their next home. So I mean, this is a great program to get people to move up from a condo to a townhouse or a townhouse to a single family home. I mean, that's the dream for most people is a single family home.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's well, that's how it used to work. It's certainly, isn't
You
it?
know
I'm not
the
so sure
thing with
about
a
today.
yard, and you had a yard, you had to cut some grass, and you got a cat and a dog, and so yeah, so this, and then he actually said, well, let's even do better, and then so he's come out and added today. I think this dropped today. He will actually up to $100,000, actually $115,000 in tax savings because he'll do some stuff here in addition to the GST. There'll be additional taxes taken off there. I'm just trying to get to the actual point here so that I get it. Do you find that real quick here?
Um,
That piece.
it
Oh,
is
here we go. Here we
related
go.
to it's development charges, isn't it?
Development charges, and
That's
he's
the
going to
trick.
incentive municipalities to cut building taxes for a total savings of about 100,000 on an average home, uh, and they'll reimburse up to 50% of the maximum 50,000 savings for like development charges and that kind of stuff. So that's huge. So that you could combining the two policies, and if you bought a home at $1.3 million, you could get a tax savings of $115,000.
It's very nice, isn't it? I'm sure, it looks good. It's a nice number, isn't it? Six figures there to brandish. Um, but again, 2 points that I would raise. First one is obviously it costs money to hook people up, to hook up new homes, doesn't it? And I'm sure because he promises 50% back, 50% reimbursement, doesn't
Yeah,
he, for this cut?
yeah.
So that still leaves, yeah, that still leaves the municipalities or whatever quite a lot of money out of pocket theoretically, and I'm sure they will squeal and complain about that and say that they have to cut services and all the rest of it to make that happen. So that's the first point. And then the second point is, what you just said there. I think you said 1.2, didn't you? 1.3, whatever. Let's say 1.3, which is the highest that Poilievre's GST cut goes to. If you're getting $100,000 off a $1.3 million home, I mean, that's not a huge amount at the end of the day, is it? When that for most Canadians, that's like an insane, like quite literally insane sum of money to ever dream of spending on a home or
Yeah.
being able to get a down payment for that. It's just like it's crazy money, and yet that is the kind of price you have to pay to get a totally bog standard 3 bedroom house in Toronto or Vancouver. So I think a lot of people will just kind of shrug their shoulders and just say, well, so what? Even though, you know, it is actually very substantial. And for the government to do something like that that doesn't come around
That's
very often.
it's the
It's a
best. Yeah,
rare gift, that, isn't it?
it's the best home incentive I've seen in my lifetime. So
Yeah. It's just a
and
shame that the housing market is so poisoned and it's so putrid and
uh, the,
broken that even a very sort of generous policy like that still is
I
hardly
think
going to save the day.
and the other part is he's talking about regulations, and I think that's the big part because I mean we've heard stories here in Kelowna where it takes up to a year to get a permit approved to build a home. So that part has to be fixed as well. But on the other side of that, again, credit to the Liberals, taking the GST off of purpose-built rentals was absolutely stellar in the amount of rentals that got built here in Kelowna. So this would actually stoke building because right now the developers on new homes are really slow. Like permits out even in Kelowna are way down. So they need
Yeah.
something to stoke development. right? And also for people to want to build, that single family home or like the townhouse or what have you. This is a really good incentive, and like I said, I've never seen a better incentive than this, right? There is no
Yeah, and it's
magic fix for
important to bear
everything.
in mind that demand is going to come down, isn't it? With because the Liberals, I mean, whoever wins, demand is going to come down, I think, because the Liberals have committed to reduce temporary migration, and so have the Conservatives.
No, but I mean, we've got a lot of demand to fill though too, right? So,
That's the
um,
thing, yeah. And the
there's a,
prices refuse to budge because,
we've
as
got a
we
lot of demand
discussed,
to fill.
that's the piggy bank for
And
everyone.
then, and then in addition to that, the Liberals did come out with another component to their plan. Um, they've now said that they're going to create a $25 billion financing fund for building of like modular homes.
Yeah, which is not going to do that's not going to improve Mark Carney's reputation among certain people that already look at him as a kind of World Economic Forum shill. It does kind of sound a bit like something they would want to do.
Well, but it also is Brookfield Asset Management just bought a modular home building company recently.
Yeah, and again, it's like really becoming his Achilles heel, isn't it? Everything that he does, every policy that he announces, it's just about all cases, Brookfield have got some sort of link to whatever it is he's talking about.
How fortuitous. Uh,
Well, I'm sure from his perspective, he's gonna, he won't be happy about that, or at least his managers, like his media people, they will not be happy about that because it's like every single time he has to go through, a kind of hit to his reputation and a suggestion that his motives are not pure.
so I don't know. Yes, somehow Trump's name ended up in the face of Trump's tariffs. We need to build for Canadians. We're going to build homes that Canadians can afford. A new industry that can take on the world. So you're going to get a house about this big. Uh, I jest a little bit, but modular homes are small typically. They're small homes. And I'm not saying they're bad for first time home buyers, but I'm just, like that shouldn't be what we are selling as the Canadian dream.
Well,
So
the
they
thing
do the,
is, like so much of the angst right now among younger people is that they are not able to achieve the same standard of living as their parents or even their grandparents in some cases. And I think this is not going to help with that kind of
well, here's
perception, is it? It's not going to make people think, oh yeah, like I've finally got a home. If it's a modular home, yeah, people are not going to be too pleased with that. Although it is obviously better than it's better than nothing.
well, we have to change the perception though as well because we've had cities, including this one, talk about they don't want single family lots. They don't want single family lots. They said that in the climate change agenda, we need to build up, not out. And they don't want urban sprawl. They don't want this. They don't want that. They want 15-minute cities and all that stuff. But that's not what the Canadian dream is made of. Like, how do you have a dog and a cat and a couple of kids in 300 square feet without
Well,
having
that's the
that
thing.
marriage
The
last more than like a couple of years?
Yeah, and there's another, there's a elephant in the room here, which is the disastrously low fertility rate, and it's not really, it's something that's not completely understood, but certainly one thing that does seem important is space. And, it's that when you move from a rural environment to an to an urban environment, that's when you usually see countries or, even on a micro level, that's when you see fertility rate decline. This is not going to help increase the fertility rate, is it? If you're putting people in,
Well,
smaller homes and there's no room to grow into them.
let's look at who gets this money because the other one went right to the homeowner. You got you didn't pay the tax because the developer didn't get anything out of that. The homeowner got it right, didn't pay the tax. So that's where the money went, straight to the home builder. Now look at this one. Mark Carney-led government will double the pace of construction to almost 500,000. We'll come back to that. Build Canada Homes. It's going to create a new government. Just what we need, more government. Build Canada Homes to get federal government back into the business of home building. Because, like, why not get the government to build it? Like Ronald Reagan said, like, we're from the government. We're here to help. You're going to run. So the government is going to act as a developer to build affordable housing at scale, uh, catalyzing the housing industry and providing over $25 billion in financing to innovative prefabricated home builders in Canada. So that's going to developers, home builders, and companies like Brookfield Asset Management. So they're going to get cheap financing. There you go, cheap financing. And also providing $10 billion in low-cost financing and capital to affordable home builders. None of that is going to the homeowner. That's all to companies that are building homes.
It's
There you
a
go.
lot of what they call pork in America, isn't it? Lots of pork to hand out to various
And
applicants.
and
Because
then
obviously there'll be an application process there, so you'll need loads of government workers to do that as well, to keep them busy. And then they'll have to arbitrate, they'll have to decide which ones are worthy. They'll put in all kinds of totally irrelevant stuff about probably I would say about like climate change and diversity, equity, inclusion, that kind of thing. There'll be all kinds of requirements to succeed in getting the funding.
and guess who
It'll be,
qualifies?
it'll
I
be a bonanza for HR people, put it that
and
way.
guess who automatically qualifies? The company that were built around that stuff. Make housing market work better by catalyzing private capital, cutting red tape. And here's the other. You were talking about it. They're also like that meme where somebody's copying somebody else's homework all the time, but they just put in different words. Cutting municipal development charges in half. There you go. Sounds familiar for multi. And this is the MURBs, and again, this is for home builders, not for the homeowner. This is for MURBs. We talked about it yesterday in our daily news show while working with provinces, territories. Reintroducing a tax incentive, which this is the MURB thing again. Originally introduced in 1970s for tens of thousands of rental homes, more rental homes, and they scrapped it because they said it cost way too much, and the only benefit was the developers and the promoters. Not much. That was scrapped by the government of Canada because it said this benefited the developers and promoters. And so he's bringing it
Yeah.
back and facilitating the conversion of existing structures into affordable housing units. There you go.
But it's quite interesting that they say about the Housing Accelerator Fund as well. They're going to build on that. That's the success of the Housing Accelerator Fund. I
Yeah.
mean, that's quite a controversial policy as well. And then they say we're going to further reduce housing bureaucracy. But what they've said there, $25 billion and then another 10.
So
That's going to create an enormous amount of bureaucracy because
so
that's how these things are handed out. It's always a bureaucratic nightmare to try and get money out when you declare that you're going to help some sector.
so again, who gets the money in the Carney plan? First-time home buyers get the GST removed. The first-time home buyers get the GST removed on homes under $1 million. That's the end of it for the homeowner there. Everything else is towards developers and modular home builders. That's who's getting the breaks here, and the cheap financing. $25 billion for financing for innovative prefab homes, and $10 billion in low-cost financing for affordable home builders. So there you go. So, and then the MURB one, some incentives, there are tax incentives for MURBs. So lots of it for developers and promoters. A good win for them, and not much for the actual homeowner. Well, maybe some of those costs will trickle down into that for these small homes. We've seen what people have paid for these small homes. Some of them are pretty expensive, actually. And then if you look at, again, we go back to the Polyev one, a lot of that goes right into the hands of the homeowner, up to $115,000 right directly to the homeowner.
It's a student of economics uh, at university or something like that would love this kind of comparison because it's a difference in philosophies, isn't it? One is more like Keynesian, top down, and the other one is very much of a kind of Friedmanite variety. Sorry, that's my son running in the room there. He's definitely a Keynesian, my son. But
There you go.
it's the liberal perspective is fundamentally Keynesian, isn't it? It's like it's the government has to direct everything and it's top down. It's handing out the money.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
Control the purse. Control the
they
purse.
make the decisions. Yeah. And then the conservative one, you know, it's the kind of thing that you mentioned Ronald Reagan earlier. It is kind of reminiscent of Ronald Reagan, and he was influenced by Friedman, wasn't he? And the kind of
Yeah.
the sort of what did they call themselves? That school, the Chicago School or whatever. It's more that kind of you just have to completely liberate the consumer, and then they will make the right choice, or the citizen even. That's what Friedman would say. Like, give them the maximum freedom and choice, and then they'll fix whatever problem is in the market.
We're going to do something a little bit different on this show as well with these policy breakdowns. We're going to score the winner in this, and it's our opinion. We're going to score the winner. So the winner, I'm going to pick. You can pick the winner, and I can pick the winner, and then also we'll see who the winners are. And I'll go first, and I'll say the winner in this one. I would say the Polyev housing plan puts more money into the hands of the homeowner. So a score for the Polyev policy overall, and also score for the homeowner. A win on both sides of that. And then for me, I would put the win for companies and developers on the um, liberal plan. Big win for companies, like a lot of the easy money financing. So the corporations win in the liberal plan for me, and the homeowner wins in the Polyev plan. You?
I would say when you say homeowner, you mean people that already own homes or people that want to
No, no,
become
like the
homeowners?
new home buyer. Like if you're the new home buyer.
Yeah, because in that sense, I would say if you own a home and you want it to retain its value, I would say the liberal plan would be more for you because
No, no, just in the plan itself.
yeah,
You'll
but
go
I mean
down some philosophy road there or whatever. So
it's hard to say really on the other one those two measures. I mean, for the homeowner, it does look pretty transparently to to be the case, and obviously to be the case that you get more off with the Polyev deal, the
well, the
Polyev
homeowner
offer.
wins. Like I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah,
Like the
the
homeowner
buyer, the
the wins because like in the other plan, only a first-time home buyer gets a plan, and the other one you actually win almost twice as much if you do the maximum, and it's all for the homeowner. Whereas in the other plan, really the bulk of that plan is into the corporations.
I would say as well that there's a timescale question. I would say in the short term as well, the Polyev one looks almost certainly to be better, like more likely to bring the prices down for new buyers. But then the Carney plan is much more long term, isn't it? It's that I mean, God knows how long that's all going to take. That's a hell of a lot of capital to dish out. That even that in itself will take a long time to dish out
And
that
then
money.
it'll
And then
take
there's the actual building and all the rest of it. I mean,
you know what.
You won't know the result of the Carney plan for like 10 years or something like
And then
that.
you
So
you also will then spend another 3 years getting disclosure and who got the money and who spent it and how they spent it. And
yeah, then you have to prorogue Parliament when people ask questions about it. It's, you know, it's a lot of work.
a lot of work because like nobody will know where the money went and who got it and where it went. Um, yeah, it's one full of red tape. And the problem with this plan is the Liberals under Trudeau came out with the home building plan where they're going to build $650,000 homes, and that was only in June, I think, June of 2024, where they said they were going to build 650,000 homes a year. And in an internal leaked document, it said in that internal leaked document that they knew that that was impossible, yet they ran with it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it was these targets. I feel like it's a bit overused when people come out with the target and then someone else will be like, "Oh, this is like reminds me of the Soviet Union or something like that." But I have to say, that reminded me of the Soviet Union. It was like a sort of 5-year plan, wasn't it? And it was completely unrealistic and
Yeah.
was never
But
going to work. And it didn't have Stalin to like, you know, get the guns out and force people to make it happen. So
well,
obviously it failed.
you did some basic math. 500,000 homes a year. You divide that by like weekdays, because like we know that people aren't going to work almost all the time, right? So, there's
Yeah.
only like 50 weeks. It gives them some holidays there, and then 50 times 5 is 250 days. So that's a lot of homes every day. And they were nowhere near it. And don't forget the record in Canada was in the 70s, about 272,000 homes. That's when we had a young workforce. You still have to find people to build these homes.
That's the other thing, demographics. You know, we mentioned it earlier about the fertility rate. But the Canada's demographics, like this still hasn't, I don't think this has entered the public conscience yet. I don't think people are aware of this. I don't think it's in their mind that Canada, for a very, very long time, for decades now, has had a sub-replacement rate, um,
So
fertility rate. There aren't very many people that, and this is, as you say, this is a numbers game. It really does. It's like geopolitics, macroeconomics. It's like very old-fashioned, very 20th century concepts. You need the people if you want to hit these kind of numbers,
let
and
me
we
just
obviously don't have those people.
let me just say this as an accountant. If you look at the Polyev plan, you build a house, like the homeowner is incentivized to go and get that house built while this plan still is available, right? So he's going to be in a rush. The homeowner's going to push, right? I need a builder. I need my house built because I need to get this $115,000. Do you know what I mean? So it's the individual that is going to incentivize to get this done. If you don't, like because the plan they could take it away at any point, right? So that's driven by the homeowner, right? Now these financing plans of 25 billion and 10 billion dollars, it reminds me of something similar that happened in the United States. The Democrats on this EV strategy rollout and charging systems and all that. I think they gave like 20, and I might get these numbers a little bit wrong, $25 billion to build out a charging network across the nation, the
Mm.
United States of America. And I think they built 7 chargers for that. Do you know what I mean? So they get
Yeah.
all the money, the corporations sit on this money, they get the money, they get the financing, and not much happens because there's not much incentive once they have the money. They have the money already, but there's nobody, you know what I mean? Like, other than the government saying, oh, we're going to meet
Yeah.
the targets, they'll go, well, we need another consultation, we need another this, we need another that, we need this, that, and another thing. And how much money gets eaten up? Like, if you look at, even we talk about Justin Trudeau's leaving plan, what did he say? He wanted to build that railroad, high-speed transit between Quebec City and Toronto.
Yeah.
$4 billion just for planning.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bonanza, isn't it, for certain people, for those
I,
consultants. That's it. That's who'll benefit.
I ran that through ChatGPT, and I think it said, and he said 4 years or something. I can't even remember the timeline. And I ran it through ChatGPT, and it said, call China. I think $100 million for planning, and not 4 billion. How do you like? I mean, how do you even say that and not feel guilty?
Yeah. I think you're right to point that out as well, and looking at things like TMX as well, and Site C and BC. You look at these big projects that have been done along these lines, this with this method, and they're way over budget, and
Well,
they were never built on time. I mean, it's been a disaster, hasn't it? This approach to any sort of project.
if you give the incentives to like big companies and consultants and that, they'll just burn it. But if you think about it, like when you put the incentives right down to the homeowner, like liberals have done some good things, like solar panel stuff. Like that's been taken advantage of because it's actually right at the homeowner, right? So the homeowner has to take advantage. He has to go out and get it and stuff like that. Same as the EV rebates and that. It's actually the person buying the car that drives these EV rebates. I think Tesla did, and we're going to do this story, they did about $43 million of EV rebates right at the end. But the car buyer was doing, like the actual end user. That's where the incentives need to go, right to the end user. So that's where, like Canadians are actually benefiting from it, not some large corporation, McKinsey and Co. and all these other consultants, and they're like $4 billion for a railroad. Like that's obscene. I'll do
Yeah,
it.
and
Hey, you and I could probably do it with a crayon and ChatGPT.
get my son to do it, get the Keynesian to do it. But no, I do think, speaking of Keynes there, I think this just shows now that not many people are doing this kind of in-depth look at the policies and the kind of philosophy behind the policies. But I think this just shows like how different the choice is in this election. Like they have very, very different approaches to what you would call, if you're being fancy, political economy. Their attitudes are so different, like extraordinarily different, unusually different. You don't usually in recent elections in Canada, and even in, you look to the US, you look to like Europe, there hasn't usually been this kind of choice on offer, but there really is. It's a
But
very, very dramatic, stark difference in how they're going to approach economics.
But even if you look at it, though, the liberals will say it's all about the individual because that's what they stick up when they say the conservatives only care about the corporations. But when you look at these plans, it's actually the opposite. The liberal plan is directed at the corporations. The conservative plan is directed at the average Canadian homeowner. It's
Yeah,
completely
and
different from what they say, right? They say that, if you listen to Jagmeet Singh, Pierre Poilievre is only about the corporations. It's actually the opposite. If you look at these plans, Carney's plans is to the corporations. There's $35 billion directed to corporations in easy money
yeah, and it's
financing.
like it's being done by the state. It's kind of
Yeah,
it's a statist approach
yeah,
as well. It's where the state gets to have all this money and it
yeah,
decides, and it's like
yeah.
very much about the government and the power of the government.
This is a
And you
key.
see this with Carney. You see that Carney believes this because I listen to every time Carney speaks. I listen to every word he says. Likewise, Polyev. I'm trying to sort of keep on top of that. And you see Mark Carney, it becomes clear more and more clear every day that he looks upon the sort of practice of a tax cut, the very act of a tax cut. He looks at that in a negative light. He thinks that a tax cut is a loss. It's like it's a defeat, and it means that the government and the state and people like him will no longer be able to direct resources. They'll no
Right.
longer be top down. And so he justifies it by saying that means we're going to lose services. There are going to be cuts to the programs and things like that. But really, that's a philosophical, a motive, let's say, or it's representative of his philosophy, which is that the state should control what happens, and that means obviously that means you're going to have to pay taxes, but it means that the government controls it. Whereas he looks at the tax cuts, which to Pierre Poilievre, a tax cut is like that's what he's in the business for. That's why he's a politician. It's to cut taxes. He thinks that's going to fix everything. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Carney looks at that and he thinks that's a waste. Like
I
you're wasting an opportunity.
I even got a better one for you on that. Bank of Canada governor, Bank of England governor. Where's his direction? Financing corporations. That's who we need. You know what I mean? Like the money's going to the usual suspects. And it happens to be the company that he owns shares in happens to be a home builder. So the financing goes to the companies that, you know what I mean? It's corporation financing. The other one is about the people. So if you want corporations to get more cheap financing, then there's your answer. And if you want homeowners, regular Canadians, to get the benefit directly, there's your answer. One isn't a
Hmm?
one isn't a Bank of Canada governor, you know what I mean, like financing, because bankers think a certain way. Like what's in it for the bank, you know what I mean? Because the cheap financing also has a cost, right? Because Canada has to borrow that money to lend that. Do you know what I mean? Because we don't have surplus,
Yeah,
we have
given our
deficits.
deficit.
Yeah, so we have to service that deficit. So there's a cost to that as well. That increases our debt.
Yeah, but I mean, what Mark Carney and Mark Carney's supporters would say is that this crisis is so huge, the housing crisis, that it's not as simple as we just
You
cut
mean,
taxes and
do,
it'll
do
fix itself. We
you
need
mean the
to get
one?
in there like FDR, and we
Yeah,
need to use all the muscle of the state to make this happen. That would be their argument that that's the only way that we're ever going to get
and
to
I
half a
and I would
million
argue
homes
back.
built every year.
The argue back and say, you mean the crisis you created with bad policy? You want to follow bad policy with more bad policy? Doesn't
Well,
make
Mark Carney
sense.
by name has been accused of causing this crisis, hasn't he, with his quantitative easing and easy money policies
Let's
as
go
as
back to
a
that,
central
like,
banker.
because this thing talks about building container homes basically for renting. Um, and Brookfield Asset Management called that their sweet spot. More cheap financing for corporations so they can take advantage of the sweet spot.
Yeah, that's certainly one way to interpret it, isn't it?
Anyway, I score the win for the Conservatives on this because it goes right to the taxpayer as opposed to the corporations.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I do stick to my guns there. If you actually already own a home, You probably would want the
You want
Liberals in
less
the
homes?
end, and
Is that what you're
that
saying?
seems
You
to
want
be,
less homes?
yeah, that seems, yeah.
What about
Well,
your kids?
and
Do you want
also
your
more
do you want
uncertainty.
do you want your kids to have homes?
But if you're if you're thinking about buying a house in the next couple of years or something like that, the conservative policy, I think I don't think it's possible to deny that that would benefit you
And
more
and I
in the
would
short
think
term.
the conservative policy is the future for young people. And the other one, definitely, like you said, is a great way to make sure that the older people retain high values for their homes because they're scarce. If that's what you're trying to
Yeah,
say.
but I mean, again, Carney or a supporter of Carney would say, look, it's not just about these boomers and protecting their investment. It's also about the entire Canadian economy, which is kind of like hedged against real estate. And we
Mm.
can't, we just cannot let that happen because it would collapse the Canadian economy. But I would never expect to hear them say that actually, that transparently, because that's not, I don't think people like to talk about that. It
It's a pretty bad
upsets
argument, right?
people.
It's a
Well,
pretty
it's a
tough
bad
argument to
argument, I
make, right?
guess you could
I have
say,
a house.
but it upsets people as well.
Hey, I have a house. Sucks to be you. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, too late, buddy. The economy needs these houses to be $1 million.
Poor little Raffy. Like you can't have a house till Pop leaves the planet. That's when you get your house.
Well, maybe you'll get a nice modular home. We can
Well,
build it in the yard.
yeah. I mean, I think we got to get past this too, where we're tying up land and we can't get land. We can't do this. Can't do that. Can't do this. Can't do that. Um, Canada, the second largest landmass in Canada, in the world. Second largest landmass in the world. And a lot of municipalities tell you there's no land to build single family homes. Ask them.
Well, that's also a pledge. That's another Tory pledge that we didn't mention, isn't it? That they want to sell 15% of all
You mean
federal buildings.
the empty buildings, that are dilapidated and not being taken care of? I mean, those buildings that we talked about yesterday in the story, the Holly Doan's Blacklock story, where they say they're not even taking care of these buildings, and the people aren't coming to work. Those buildings.
Yeah. Well, one of the things he likes to say at his rallies is that he wants to see families growing up in the former CBC headquarters or something like that. So I think he's got his eyes on some CBC property.
Yeah. Anyway, that's our housing thing. We're going to do this with all these platforms. We're going to have some fun with it for sure and try to make it so that it's easy to understand. Appreciate your comments and thoughts and everything, and see if this makes sense to you. We're going to try and break it down for the common person. We're not going to try to make it so vague, like like some of these press releases. You read through them, you're just like, what is it saying? Or if you listen to some of these press conferences, you're just like, what's going on here? And some of them are intentionally vague.
Indeed, very much so.
Well, that's it. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We do a news show every morning, Ian Burns and I. We do the really big show. And then we're also doing these election 2025 platform updates. We're going to do everything on the platform. So we're going to try and let you know what you're actually voting for. Instead of just voting for a red sign or a blue sign, what is it that you're voting for? That's how you should vote. You shouldn't vote for the sign color. Because in Canada, it's an MP thing. It's not about voting for Carney or Pierre. It's about voting for your MP. And I think we're getting lost in that too, right? I think even a lot of the Liberal candidates and conservative candidates think we're just voting for one person. And that's not how our Westminster system is set up. It's kind of drifting there, but it shouldn't be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also happening in the homeland of the Westminster system. I find becoming more kind of presidential.
I think everybody looks at the president of the United States and likes the way he uses that pen. And even Mark Carney, guilty of that in his first day, right? Took out that Sharpie and he was like right there like he was Donald Trump. Very Trumpist in a whole bunch of things. The way he treats reporters, signing with that Sharpie and everything. He's definitely copying a lot of the stuff. Yet he's trying to stick again, like they said, he's trying to stick all the Trump stuff onto Pierre, but he's the one that's doing the actions that are very similar to Trump. There you go. That's it for today. Housing was the platform we talked about today, and tomorrow we'll be back with more. And we might even have to do a couple of these a day just to catch up on some of the stuff. We'll talk crime maybe tomorrow. All right. Thank you for watching Now Media.